Hi everyone, I'm Amira Dawood, psychologist and PEAT and aspect trainer. I am pleased to welcome my very special guest, Mr. Vladimir Stojacovic. I had the pleasure to be trained by him as he is PEAT and aspect trainer of trainers and a processor. Before starting, I'd like to start with a small introduction about my guest. Vladimir have been practicing spiritual technology for more than 20 years. He was the right hand of Zifurad Slavinsky, the founder of these methods. Vladimir is the author of 3 books, Spiritual Technology, A Journey into Oneself, Integral Protocol, How to Integrate Internal Conflicts, and Satori Protocol, How to Resolve Emotional Problems and Achieve Spiritual Alignment. He developed 2 methods, Integral Protocol System and Satori Protocol System, and trained individuals and non-professional and professional background like life coach, psychologists, psychotherapists, counselors, NLP practitioner, so on, to use this method effectively with their clients. Vladimir, I am delighted that you accepted my invitation.
Thank you, Amira, for inviting me.
Thank you. In this interview, Vladimir will share with us his expert opinion on the powerful spiritual technology techniques, especially PEAT and aspect processor methods. We will talk with Vladimir about his learning journey and his experience with PEAT techniques. The first question is, what is spiritual technology and what is the purpose of this of using it?
First of all, thank you for this nice introduction.
You are welcome.
To answer your question, spiritual technology is a group of methods developed by Zifurad Slavinsky. Its purpose is to accelerate our spiritual evolution. And its other purpose is to help us release our emotional problems. So in short, that would be the purpose of spiritual technology.
Okay. What is the definition of PEAT and what is the main idea of PEAT?
Well, I am not aware that there is some official definition of PEAT, but we can probably talk about what makes PEAT special, what makes it different from other methods. So its main goal is to help us release our emotional issues. But at the same time, what is special about PEAT is that it integrates polarities. So all these methods from spiritual technology, they all help us release our emotional problems, or what we call mental and emotional charge. But different techniques are different procedures. And what makes PEAT different is it integrates polarities. And what is especially interesting is deep PEAT, which integrates deeper polarities. So those polarities that spontaneously surface during one process. So that's pretty interesting. For example, when I worked with Tony Robbins, in one moment, he told me, for a long time, I was looking for a method that would help me integrate polarities. And I didn't find it until now. So yes, that would be the special thing about PEAT. It does integrate deeper polarities, unconscious polarities that exist on deeper levels of unconscious, and which surface during the process spontaneously.
Okay. I know that you have met the famous influencer Tony Robbins 2011, and you trained him to use PEAT and other methods developed by Zifurad. And since then, you are joining him in his very famous seminar, the Ultimate Relationship Program, and more. Would you tell us more about this experience and how you added value to each other?
Yes. So after we did our few meetings online, Tony liked these methods, And then he invited me to participate in his seminars, in some of his seminars. In the beginning, it was in a few different ones, and then I remained as a part of this emotional relationship program, ultimate partnership program. Can't remember the exact title of this seminar. It's all about emotional relationships. In my role in that seminar is to lead individual processes with participants. So since the topic of the seminar is emotional relationship, we can expect that lots of emotions surface. And during the seminar, many people have these emotional issues come up. And then my role would be to individually work with them, to guide them through these methods and to help them release these problems. So yes, that's what I do in this seminar. And I think it does contribute to the program.
I think you enjoy that.
Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Vladimir, in your book, Spiritual Technology Journey into Oneself, you mentioned that the ego is the container of all the emotional and mental change that we have accumulated over the years. Can you explain this for us?
Well, I don't think I can completely explain it because it remains a mystery, or at least partially it remains a mystery for me to this day. But what I can tell you is that during our development, we suppress many thoughts and emotions. And each thought or emotion that we suppress, it consists of energy. It's suppressed energy. And when we accumulate many of those thoughts and emotions, it all adds up to one entity that we call the ego. And as you do these methods, at one stage of your practice, you actually begin to notice this entity. So this entity is like a structure consisting of many suppressed thoughts and emotions, identities, and so on. And we knew about that. But what was surprising to me is to actually realize that it is almost physical. That when you have so much of those thoughts and emotions suppressed, when they accumulate around you, you can almost feel it as something physical. And that was the thing that I pointed out in my book. How that originated, how physical it actually is, it all remains kind of a mystery, but I can tell that it exists. I can tell that about 25 years ago, when I did processes many hours per day, in one moment I started to detect and even physically feel that entity.
Okay, that's nice. Also, in your book, you mentioned about the ego that you described that when you are newborn, we have this ego, and we have benefit from the ego. There is benefit from this ego. Can you explain this more for us?
Well, from my experience, this is actually what happens. So we talk about spiritual development, and we often say how there is something which is called true self or true being. And the purpose of this spirituality would be to uncover this true being, to uncover this natural state, the state of enlightenment, even though that word is not really suitable, but I use it because everybody knows what it means. And the question is, if this state of enlightenment, if that is our natural state, how come we are not in our natural state? How come we have to do the spiritual methods in order to experience it? And the answer to that would be because we have something which we call the ego. And what is ego? Many people in spirituality almost consider it as like bad luck or some punishment. or something. But that's not what it is from my experience. So the ego is an evolutionary device that has a certain purpose. And the purpose of the ego is for us to become aware. So if you compare an adult and a baby, essentially, they are consciousness. Essentially, they are the same. However, there is one difference. An adult person is self-aware. Now we can sit and talk about various things, and a baby cannot do that. And this awareness is the result of the ego. So they say that when a baby is born, baby lives in some kind of oneness. It's like an ocean of existence. And the baby does not differentiate itself from the rest of the world. It doesn't differentiate itself from parents or from anything else. And the baby has a drive to become aware. That's this evolutionary drive that we all have. So the first thing that that baby does in order to become aware, it separates oneness in two. It creates the first polarization, which is me and non-me. Me as opposed to everything else. The purpose of that is to be able to perceive itself. And through perceiving itself, it becomes aware. So, you know, there is this famous Lao Tzu, Chinese Taoist from centuries ago, and he wrote this book, Tao Te Ching. And in one of the sutras, he says, from one, two is created. From two, 10,000 things are created. And this is what we are talking about. So this baby lives in the state of oneness. And then the baby creates the first separation. That's two. To me and everything else, non-me. And then both sides multiply. So what happens is on the me side, we create various identities like I am consciousness, I am body, I am energy, I am male, I am female, I am superior, I am inferior. Many, many identities are created. And also many impressions about the rest of the world is created, about the parents, about life, many, many impressions. So when all that adds up, that's what we call the ego. That's how this energy entity that we talked about is created. And the purpose of the ego is for us to become aware. Now this baby has something to perceive me and to perceive non-me. And through that perception and through interaction of me and non-me, awareness is developed. That's how we become self-aware. I think scientists say that we are about 2 years old when we know that when we see ourselves in a mirror, we know it's me. We know it's not someone else. Okay, so in one moment, we develop this self-awareness and the personality keeps developing. And once we are an adult, after puberty, we are fully, of course, aware. And what happens at that moment, we do not need the ego anymore. It fulfilled its purpose. But we cannot just get rid of it because we are identified with it. I perceive that's me. It's a false self, but in my perception, that's me. So that's why spirituality was originally created in order to help us release the ego. Yes. So now I gave you a long talk, but I can't remember what was your original question. So
yes, you already answered the question. It was about the ego, and I like the way you write in your book, your talk in your book about the ego, and from where it comes, and that we should after that try to manage it because it's the reason of all of our problems.
Yes, so the ego itself, you know, the initial separation, the initial polarity was a conflict, me and non-me, one split in two. And then, as Lao Tzu said, from two, 10,000 things are created. So there are many, many identities on one side and many identities on the other side and impressions. And it's a conflicting structure. In itself, Ego consists of various polarities or conflicts, if that's how you want to call them. So that's why integrating polarities is important. And when you have these internal conflicts, they create negative reactions. So that's why we have negative reactions continuously. So if, let's say, an internal conflict is pretty much the same as an external conflict. So if you imagine a child whose parents are arguing, and the child supports the mother, and what will happen, the father will have a negative reaction and the child will have a problem. One parent is angry with him. And then tomorrow the child changes and now supports father, but this time mother will have a negative reaction. So the point is, whichever side is being chosen by this child, he will have a problem, okay? The same thing happens with these internal conflicts. We have two opposing forces within ourselves. We like to use that example, let's say, love and freedom, okay? And if a man says, well, I don't want to get married because I will lose my freedom, that basically means he has a conflict. He perceives that he can only have one or the other, okay? So if he supports this pole, which is love, he will have a relationship, but he will feel that he lost his freedom. And then on the other side, if he gets out of that relationship, supports the freedom side, now he will be free, but he will suffer because he perceived that he cannot have a love at the same time. So the ego in itself is consists of many polarities or many conflicts, and it creates negative reactions, negative states and reactions. So that's one problem with the ego. The other problem is it creates existential suffering because we perceive that we are this separate unit, mortal unit, and that creates existential suffering.
Okay. Then, Vladimir, we want to talk about the spiritual development and problem solving. We need to spotlight on it.
Yes. So we talked a bit about spiritual development. And the only thing that spiritual development is just de-identification, nothing else. So I already mentioned how throughout our lives, we identify with various concepts, thoughts, emotions, and so on. Okay, as I said, I'm body, I'm consciousness, I am energy, I am space, I am male, I am female, I am happy person, unhappy person, I am a child, I'm an adult. So we have many of those, and they are all false selves. Okay, none of them is our true self. So spirituality simply means de-identification. That's it. Within our methods, we do that through making the unconscious conscious, which means closing our eyes, applying our methods, triggering various states and triggering thoughts and emotions and identities, recognizing them, verbalizing them, and releasing them. So making the unconscious conscious and de-identification is spiritual development. Nothing else. It's not healthy food. It's not astrology. It's not this. It's not that. I don't have anything against those things, but that's not spiritual development. So yes, de-identification. Emotional problems. Well, first of all, what are emotional problems? They are negative states and reactions that are triggered by internal and external events. We can call them triggers, okay? And I classify those triggers in 4 categories, and they are negative experiences, problems, goals, and beliefs. If you think about a negative experience, it doesn't matter whether it happened 3 hours ago or 30 years ago. When I remember it, if I still feel bad, that means it is a trigger. This negative experience activates negative state in me, and that state consists of suppressed thoughts, emotions, identities. So we can use these methods applied on this trigger, or to be more precise, on this reaction caused by this trigger. And we can release it by using the process. And the goal is to release this reaction. So next time, when I think about this negative experience, I don't feel a negative reaction. Okay. Problems are those situations that repeat itself, that we know always cause negative reaction. For example, public speaking. So every time when I have to do a presentation at work, I feel stage fright, anxiety, or anger when my boss criticizes me, or I don't know, tension in the presence of unknown people. Okay, so problems are those situations that we know will cause a negative reaction. And the same principle apply. We can use these methods, apply on this negative reaction caused by this trigger, and release it. And our goal is to not have this negative reaction when this situation happens again. So if my problem is tension in the presence of unknown people, I would like to apply these methods to release this reaction. So next time when I'm in the presence of unknown people, I don't feel it. And then also goals, we have negative reactions to our goals. That's why people talk about willpower for centuries. It's because we all know that we have these negative reactions, these resistances that prevent us from working on our goals. And that's why they talk about willpower. They think that's a solution. Well, it may be a short-term solution, but you don't want to live your life like that, in that kind of continuous tension forever. Or that's why they talk about motivation, okay, because they think that's another solution. With these methods that we do, like PEAT and Aspectics, we have a different approach. We actually target negative reactions. So let's say I want to exercise, but I feel resistance. I can actually target resistance, this negative reaction, and release it. And I can target other negative reactions that I have regarding exercise. So I bring myself into a state which is without a negative reaction to my goal. It's a more optimal state from which I can actually take action. I can exercise without these internal blockages. And then the last trigger of negative reactions would be beliefs. And we all have them, like bad things always happen to me. I am not good enough. Life is suffering, and so on and so on. There are many of those. And yeah, they trigger negative states and reactions. So we can also use these methods to release those negative states and reactions. So these beliefs don't have any effect on us. And maybe one thing to understand about beliefs, in our context, it's not important whether a belief is true or not true. Mm-hmm. It's only important whether it activates a negative reaction or not. Because if it doesn't, then it doesn't bother me, even if it's true.
Okay, that's great. Thank you so much.
So that would be a work on emotional problems, basically identifying triggers, applying methods on those negative reactions, releasing those, and freeing ourselves from those reactions.
Okay. I remember that while I was taking the course with you, the Aspectics, you make a session for me about a goal. It was writing my first book. It was from 1 year, and I start to write my book when you remove this charge around the goal. So yes, it's working very sure. Okay, let's choose another question. Can very high sensitive people go through spiritual techniques to help themselves and to help the others? Now we are talking about if somebody wants to learn to take these courses to help themselves and others. The high sensitive people can go through these techniques, or it's difficult for them?
No, they can go through these techniques. And I think the answer is pretty easy. It's yes. I don't see any reason why sensitive people wouldn't be able to do these methods.
Okay. Is it easier to make sessions to somebody else than yourself?
Okay. So if you do this on yourself, after a few times, it's a routine. Why? Because you are just one client to yourself. What does that mean? Okay, so if you are a professional, you need to know how to respond to different personalities. okay? But you are just one of those. So basically, it's like everything else. When you do this on yourself, you just see how you respond to these methods, you learn how you respond to these methods, and from that point on, it's routine. So it's easy. I find it easy to do processes on myself. Working on other people, it depends. So once you learn this process, when you work with easy clients and average clients, anybody can do it. It's easy. But what makes a professional, what is the difference between a professional and an average processor is that professionals know how to work with difficult clients, with hard clients. And for that, you need to gain experience. So yes, easy to work on yourself. I don't see any problem with that. For over 90% of people doing these methods on themselves, it's easy. Okay. However, if you want to be a professional, then you will need to gain experience and to learn how to respond to different personalities, and of course, to learn how to work with hard clients.
Okay. And I think the duration of the session is different if you are working with an easy client or a difficult one, if the personality is not easy or difficult.
Well, yes, of course, everything goes faster with an easy client. Also, it depends how you organize your sessions. Okay, if your session is organized per hour, then the duration is always the same, only you can do more during that hour with an easy client. Yeah, definitely.
About the teenager, are these techniques suitable to apply on kids and teenagers?
Okay. First of all, I don't work with kids and teenagers, just so you know that. Okay, I only work with adults. These methods are made for a willing participant. So why is this important? It is assumed that if you're my client, you are fully open and fully collaborative, and you are following instructions. Okay, that's the assumption. These methods can be done with teenagers if they are open and if they want to follow instructions. If they don't, of course not. You cannot apply these methods on someone against their will without their full collaboration. And I believe that applies to any method. Okay. So also the same applies to small kids. Plus one more thing, they need to be old enough to be able to follow instructions. All right. So these conditions have to be satisfied. Old enough to follow instructions and to collaborate. And you are a psychologist, you probably know, but one doesn't just do psychotherapy with kids and teenagers. People specialize to be child psychotherapists and to be, I suppose, adolescent, if that's the right word, psychotherapists. Okay. And I trained some people who were specialized. I trained some people to use these methods who were specialized for children. And I trained some people to use these methods who were specialized for teenagers. Okay, so what's the point here? My point here is, there are two things. One thing is learning these methods, and the other thing is learning techniques to approach children and teenagers. So the first thing, I can teach you these methods, but I cannot teach you these other things.
Okay. There is a question. One of my clients was asking that some clients have really big trauma, big problem to connect with their emotions. How can we deal with such cases? Is there specific techniques for such cases?
Okay. First of all, there is no such thing as connecting to our emotions. We either feel them or we don't. Okay. When you say connecting, it sounds like a process that has like 10 steps. It's almost like you have to open one door, go through a corridor, open another door. Of course, it's not like that. They only need to be fully aware of their emotions unless they are dissociated. And there is very small amount of people which is dissociated. Okay, those are people who probably went through some traumas in the past or traumatic periods in the past. And in order to survive those periods, they separated, they suppressed, they separated not just from a few emotions, but from the complete emotional apparatus. They completely separated. And then they went through that period, but then they remained separated. Okay, they remain dissociated. With people like that, a method called DP2 is appropriate. Okay, I managed to help a number of people with this method. This method, okay, the thing is that when they are dissociated, they don't feel their emotions, they only feel body sensations. Okay, why? Because they are deeply suppressed. And once you suppress thoughts and emotions, the only level on which they can manifest is the body. So it's typical for dissociated people to have lots of body sensations, but when you lead them through the process, they don't have thoughts, they don't have emotions. So this is why this method is good, because it asks you separately for thought or image, emotional body sensation, and it guides their attention to these individual elements so they become aware of these elements. So I would use DP2 on dissociated people. Okay, but let me just point out, often people don't know how to use these methods. Okay, and they say the client cannot connect, cannot feel their emotion. That's not true. In my experience, there is a very, very small amount of people who are dissociated. And if they are truly dissociated, then you can use DP2. One good strategy which I used was to teach them DP2, to give them the method, and to tell them, do this every day. Do this every day for 2 weeks. If you do it for 2 weeks, call me. If you don't do it for 2 weeks, don't call me. So this strategy is good because they need to invest effort to associate. And it can only work if they are willing to do that. So that's one thing to keep in mind. The other thing to keep in mind is very often people say they cannot feel their emotions, but that's not really true. Okay, that's not really true. And there are a few mistakes that people are making. I don't know how much technical you want me to be in this conversation, but there are a few things that people make when doing the process. Okay, especially in the beginning of the process, when they ask the client to feel the emotion which is being triggered.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's take another question. Is there any techniques? I would like to know which technique are preferred for obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD. If you have any tips.
All right. So, okay, here's another important thing that people often confuse. So these methods are made for emotional problems. They are not made for mental illnesses and personality disorders. Okay, that's important to understand because we cannot cure mental illnesses and personality disorders. Okay, if it's a medical issue, we cannot cure it. For OCD, we can use any of these methods. Okay, we can use any of these methods to help them release their emotional problems. But we need to keep in mind that we cannot actually cure OCD with these methods. Okay, so people with mental illnesses and disorders, they also have emotional problems, and we can help them as long as we keep in mind that we cannot cure the illness or the disorder, but we can still help them to release their emotional problems and to make their life easier. So any method would be suitable for as long as we keep in mind these few things that I mentioned.
Okay, got it. Based on your experience, what do you recommend for professors when they treat patients have panic attack also? I think it's the same I'm telling you the question that my student write. They want you to answer their questions. So
okay,
yes.
so there's quite a few things. We cannot go into such technical details here, but the first thing that I would do, I would ask the client, what triggers panic attacks? What is the trigger? Is it one or is it few? And I would write them all down, and then I would treat trigger per trigger. So I had a client and she talked about panic attacks. And then I said, okay, so what is the trigger? And she was quiet for a few seconds. And she said, when somebody talks about death. Okay, that's a trigger. So, you know, then I would apply a process. Close your eyes. Imagine that somebody around you is talking about death. What is your emotion? And then we apply the process. Okay, so that's what I would do. That's the first thing. Definitely identify the triggers, one or more, and then apply processes to these triggers individually.
Okay. There is a question regarding the children's emotions. Again, children's.
Okay.
The question is about the continuous feeling of the child being insufficient and lacking in self-confidence in some situations like mom and dad separation, and give more attention to his or her sibling. What's the best way and advice to work with them?
Okay, so we do not choose methods in relation to a problem. So it doesn't matter what the problem is. We choose methods in relation to a client. Okay. So in other words, we need to test and see what methods are suitable with that particular client and to use them. So it doesn't matter what the problem is. Okay. If the problem is an emotional issue, it doesn't matter. Okay. But what we need, sometimes with a new client, I can go to 3 or 4 methods until I pick the right one. Right. Okay. So don't choose methods based on a problem. Choose methods based on a client, what they can do, what is the right method for them, what is suitable for them.
Okay. Just we want our audience to know that we can use these techniques to treat many kind of problem and beliefs, and we need to give like an examples. Maybe that's the reason I accept to discuss many of my student questions with you, because they insist that even if we told them that it's not about the situation, it's about the personality, but they need your answer also, and we didn't make it live, so they cannot connect with you and ask you this question by themselves. So
yeah,
okay.
That's okay. I just didn't get. Do you have another question for me in relation to this, or are you just commenting?
Also, they was asking about the depression. If somebody have a big trauma, like lost the members of his family, wife, son, daughter, yes, and he's suffering.
Yes.
Okay, we can use this.
Yes.
Sure,
yeah, of course we can. I did that many times. Okay. An important thing is not to push the client. Okay. In some methodologies, they ask you, feel it stronger, feel it more, feel it stronger. That's not very smart, especially for traumatic situations. Okay. That's why sometimes they say there are abreactions. Okay. Abreactions, like after the session, they have a strong reaction to what happened. Okay. That doesn't happen if you do it correctly. What is correctly? Don't push the client. If there is a traumatic experience, you just say, close your eyes, think about that experience. What do you feel now? And accept whatever they say and do the process. Don't ask them to increase the feeling, to go into that situation, nothing. Just go very lightly. When you think, and that applies to a death of a close person, which is something I did. I had clients regular clients who would come into the regular session crying, saying, my father just died, my mother died. And we did, how can you do a process or anything else when this person is overwhelmed with this one problem? So you cannot just push this aside and do something else. Okay, so yes, it works. But generally speaking, with the death of a close person or any other traumatic situation, don't push. Okay, just say, think about it. What is your emotion? And do it. And then after the process, think about it again. What is your emotion now? And do it again if there is a need.
Okay. Vladimir, you are in this spiritual technology from a long time. Would you give us some advice and tips to help us throughout our journey?
Okay, so there is only one advice. Do processes as much as possible. Okay. There is no other advice. We have procedures. Okay, we don't have, just a moment. We don't have advices. We don't have mental positions. We don't tell you how to behave, how to think, what to do between sessions. There is no dogma. We just have procedures. And 25 years ago, 30 years ago, I don't remember anymore, I was in a period when I did processes for around a year, like 8 to 16 hours per day. Okay, I'm not saying that you should do that, but the only advice, the only useful thing here is do processes on yourself. Yeah, do process on yourself. And then if you want to work with others, you also have to gain that level of experience. So the foundation is doing processes on yourself every day, at least one process per day. If you don't do that, you cannot become a good professional. So throughout your whole professional life, you have to do processes on yourself, and then you have to do it on others, because that's another level of experience. You need to work with different personalities.
Okay, got it. Would you recommend some of the books in spiritual technology for the beginners?
Well, I would always recommend books about methods. Start from that. So if you're interested in PEAT, buy the PEAT book. If you are interested in aspectics, buy aspectics book. And then you can start from there. Okay, but the most important thing, again, is do the processes. So start from these technical books. And then once you do processes on a regular basis, then you can read other books which are more maybe theoretical and so on. But I will always recommend start from technical manuals. Yes.
Okay. Is there any other topic would you like to talk about before the end of this meeting?
Well, there is one topic, but I already talked about it, and the topic is do the processes every day. That's it. Okay. You know, people often want to ask questions, and they think they will ask some very smart questions, and then they will get very smart answers, and then everything will be easier. But you know, the only actually answers that you get is those answers that you find out by doing the process. So how does that work? I had many questions, of course, and the question would happen, the question would come up, and then I was aware of that question. I would not have the answer, and I was doing processes, and maybe 3 months later or 3 years later, I would realize the answer to that question. And that is the only valid and valuable answer. If somebody tells you that, it's not really valuable before it's yours. Okay, so yes, in this discipline, if you want to call it like that, that's the purpose. Doing processes, we should put emphasis on that. Doing processes on ourselves, and that will create confidence. That will create confidence for a professional to actually be a good processor, which is the one who is leading other people to processes, or even confidence to be a good trainer. Yes.
Thank you so much.
So yes. Thank you, Mira.
Thank you. Thank you so much for accepting my invitation. It was an enjoyable meeting, and you shared with us valuable information. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for inviting me, and yeah, I enjoyed it too.
Thank you.
Okay.